Howdy, welcome to Remote Learning for Wednesday, 8/26. A reminder that the time zone assignment is due today at 3:30 p.m. If there is some sort of issue technology-wise, make sure that you let me know on Canvas or via email. Tomorrow is our e-learning day. There will be a small assignment and a video to watch over the water cycle, which we talked about on Tuesday. So you should be plenty well prepared for the e-learning assignment. It shouldn't take you all that long. So if you happen to finish early and you are behind on notes for your ISN or any assignment, that would be a perfect time for you to get caught up. The water cycle assignment will be due Friday, so we're working on it Thursday, and then you have Friday to finish and submit it. At the end of today, there will be a discussion board to complete. So we're going to go through notes, add some notes to our ISN over climate and ecosystems. So open up your ISN notes and add this to your table of contents. Go ahead, title it Climate and Ecosystems, and then add a new page. And we are ready to go. So today we are discussing climate, what the climate is, what it isn't, and the various types of climates. So first we need to differentiate between weather and climate. So weather is the condition of the air and sky at a certain time. So think storming, partly cloudy, temperature, those are all part of weather. Climate is the average weather of a place over many years. So weather is about a specific time. Climate is an average of that over a long period of time. So several years, if it's raining for several years, that adds up to the climate, or if it doesn't rain for a long period of time, then you have a desert climate. Temperature is a measure of how hot or cold the air is. So when it says it's 70 degrees outside, that's how hot the air is outside. So temperature, a measure of how hot or cold the air is. These next two words we don't need to write down. Anything that is in red when we go through notes, we don't need to write down because we either already did it or it's something that we're going to do at a later date that fits in better there. So precipitation we did yesterday, so we don't need to write it down today. Precipitation is water that falls as rain, snow, sleet, or hail. And altitude, like elevation we talked about before, is the height above or below sea level. In order to easily recognize certain climates, we group them into zones of latitude. So there's 3 zones of latitude that we use. We have the polar zones, which are on the North and South Pole, obviously for polar. And these are the areas north of the Arctic Circle in the North Pole, or south of the Antarctic Circle in the South Pole. These are also known as the high latitudes. If we look at a map or a globe, the North and South Pole are on the ends where the latitudes is the highest. The temperate zones are the areas between the high and low latitudes, also known as the middle latitudes. This is what we are in. We are in a temperate area, so we are in the temperate zones. The tropic zones are the areas between the Tropic of Cancer and the Tropic of Capricorn. So those are in the middle of our map. So if we go ahead and look at a map, it shows us the tropics and the Arctic and Antarctic Circle. So if we look at this map, at the very top, the top line in red is the Arctic Circle at 66.5 degrees north. So anything above that, anything north of that is in the Arctic zone in the north, and anything below 66.5 south is in the Antarctic Circle. So if we look at the very bottom line, the red line at the very bottom, all that white by Antarctica, that's a hard word to say, below 66.5 degrees south is in a polar zone in the south. And then if we look in the middle of our map, so the very middle line is the equator, and if we go 23.5 degrees north or south, we get another red line. So in the north we have our Tropic of Cancer line, and in the south we have our Tropic of Capricorn line. That light blue area in between would be our tropic zones. So any area in here, like Mexico, we can see a bit of Florida, Africa, and then Southeast Asia and Australia, those are all in tropic areas or tropical areas. Anything in between, so in the north, most of the US and then most of Europe is in a temperate zone. So a temperate zone is just anything between Arctic or polar and between tropic. So this is our middle of the road area. This is where most of us are, and most of us will probably end up being, unless we move down towards Texas or Florida. Most of the US is in this area. So water and climate. A big part of climate is due to large bodies of water, like oceans or seas. So a big part of oceans is currents. So as water moves, kind of like a conveyor belt or a river in the ocean, warm water moves south, or warm water moves from the tropics by the equator north, and cold water from the poles moves south to warm up. So it's kind of like a big conveyor belt pushing warm and cold air north and south, or on the southern hemisphere, south and north. So an important part of this is that it regulates global climate and creates large amounts of precipitation. So it affects weather a lot in an area, and over time, these have a big role on weather, and over a long period of time, the currents affect climate because they change the weather so frequently. So for example, ocean currents create tropical storms, and even lake effect snow like we get from the Great Lakes. So as water and air goes over the Great Lakes, it creates a lot of precipitation, and then we get that. So if we think back to a couple weeks ago, we had that large storm that came from Chicago area and the Great Lakes, or whenever we get a lot of snow, it's usually from the Great Lakes and lake effect snow. So we can think of water and climate. Water, large bodies of water affect and change the weather over long periods of time, which plays a big role in climate. So we just mentioned that large bodies of water are partially responsible for weather systems and climate. There are three notable weather systems that we are going to talk about. One is a tropical cyclone. So this is an intense rainstorm with strong winds that forms over oceans in the tropics. And then we have a hurricane, which is similar to a cyclone, except that it forms over the Atlantic Ocean. So Japan gets cyclones the same way that we get hurricanes, except since it forms in the Pacific, or one might form in the Indian Ocean and affect India, it is technically not a hurricane. So a hurricane is only one that forms from a tropical storm in the Atlantic Ocean. A tornado is a swirling funnel of wind that can reach 300 miles per hour. So a tornado we might be a little bit more familiar with because we get tornado warnings from every once in a while, but we don't get hurricane warnings because we're so far inland and so far north. But a tornado is a swirling funnel of wind that can reach 300 miles per hour. Tornado is actually more destructive in nature than a hurricane is. So a tornado is faster and more capable of destroying things than a hurricane, but hurricanes are often seen as much worse because they last a lot longer and they affect a larger area than a tornado would. Another one that we need to mention is blizzards. So we also have blizzards in the winter, which are storms that cover large areas in snow, ice, and strong winds. So there are a number of climates, all with their own distinct characteristics. We're going to talk about a couple of climates. So one is tropical wet. Tropical wet climates combine hot temperatures and heavy rainfall year-round. They are clustered around the equator. So think of jungles and rainforests. Those are tropical wet. Tropical wet and dry climates are climates with a wet season in the summer and a dry season in the winter. So they're like tropical wet, but in the winter, they don't get as much rain or precipitation, and it's a little bit drier. Humid subtropical climates. These are climates that have year-round precipitation, but they have mild winters and hot summers. So this is places like Georgia and South Carolina. They get precipitation year-round, but their winter is more mild, so they often don't get snow or ice. It's just kind of like our spring or fall. It's just kind of dreary, a jacket, lots of rain, maybe some storms. But they have very hot summers and it's very humid. Next, we have maritime. So these climates are wet year-round with mild winters and cool summers. They exist where moist wind blows onshore. So an example of this would be the Pacific Northwest, so places like Seattle and Portland are maritime, as well as some places in Australia and the United Kingdom are maritime places. Tundra climates have cool summers and bitterly cold, dry winters close to the poles, ice caps, or permanent sheets of ice covering land or sea. They have bitter cold and dry climates year-round. So these are the places incredibly far north, but that aren't completely covered in ice. So they're close to the ice caps, but they're not completely covered in ice. So an example of this would be like the very, very north part of Canada. So the places where not many people in Canada live, those are tundras. Or the very north parts of Russia. The furthest tips north of Russia are tundras. Next we have arid and semi-arid. So these are dry climates. So semi-arid are dry climates and arid are very dry desert climates that occur where there is steadily sinking air. So this is parts of Africa and the Middle East. This is where you'll see a lot of deserts. You can think of places like Arizona as semi-arid or arid. And finally, we have subarctic. So these climates have limited precipitation, cool summers, and very cold winters. So like when we were watching that Bill Nye episode last week, subarctic, they don't have a lot of precipitation. So they're technically in some places deserts, but they're so cold that anytime it does snow or does rain or precipitation falls, it'll stay there for long, long periods of time and almost never go away because it's so cold that it never gets the chance, that snow never gets the chance to melt like we get in the spring. All the snow melts. Through spring, it stays cold and it'll stay there and stay snowy for hundreds and hundreds of years. Last, we have ecosystems. So ecosystems are different from climates in that climate has an impact on ecosystems, but an ecosystem is more about the relationships of species and plants in that environment. So an ecosystem is a group of plants and animals that depend on each other and their environment for survival. So we have forest, savanna, grassland, brush, tundra, and ice cap. So if we look at forest, there are two different types of forests that we have. So we have tropical, well, there's three forests. We have tropical or subtropical forests, rainforest. Then we have temperate forest, which is what we're more familiar with. So these are thick forests of deciduous trees or trees that lose their leaves in the fall. Some temperate forests include a mix of deciduous and evergreen. So Indiana, for example, as both trees that lose their leaves in the fall, but also we have evergreen and pine trees. Next is subarctic forests. So these are forests that have almost entirely coniferous trees. So these trees produce cones to carry seeds, and so they don't drop leaves in the fall. So they don't lose any leaves in the fall. These are pine trees, evergreen trees. You know, big when you think of a Christmas tree, that is a coniferous tree. These features protect the trees through the cold, dry winters of subarctic climates. So next we have savanna. Savanna is a park-like landscape of grasslands with scattered trees that can survive dry spells. Savannas are found in tropical areas with dry seasons. So when you think of Africa, this is often what you think of, large areas of lots of grass and trees scattered every once in a while. When you think of Lion King, you're thinking of savanna. Next, we have grassland. So grassland and brush are fairly similar. Grassland is an area where grass covers the region, and they get more rain than deserts, but not enough to support forests. So they have enough rain to support grass and some smaller bushes and plants, but not enough for trees to grow. Brush is like grassland, they get enough rain for them not to be deserts, but not enough rain for them to grow trees and forests, but they do grow shrubs or low plants. So an example of this would be like the Mediterranean is an example of a brush. Next we have tundra. So the tundra is an area of cold climate, very low-lying plants. Here grasses grow and low shrubs bloom during brief, cool summers. Animals of the tundra are able to live with cold temperatures and scarce food. And last we have ice caps. So thick ice caps form around the poles. With their year-round climate and extreme cold, no plants can live on this ice. It's too cold. The water there, any precipitation that falls would be ice, so ice or snow, and so trees and plants aren't able to grow there. Okay, if we have finished all of our notes and you don't need to go back for anything you missed, we have a discussion board to respond to. So the discussion board is just going to be differentiating between weather, climate, and ecosystems. So you're just gonna tell me how climate is different from weather, climate is different from ecosystems, and then you're gonna tell me what the definition of climate is, and you're gonna do this all in your own words. Okay, if you have any questions, I will be available to answer. We're still having some problems with the Zoom chat. It seems to be an issue that a lot of people are having, so I'm going to try and find a way to work around it and try and see if I can fix it somehow. But if you need to reach out to me, you can message me on Canvas or shoot me an email. Okay, have a nice day. I will see you guys tomorrow. Reminder that tomorrow is our e-learning day. So you may see like a short minute-long video of me explaining what to do, and then there will be a different video from someone else for you guys to watch.